think it's essential for doctors to have a challenge outside of just their day-to-day practice. That's something that they're interested in. For some people, they want to do the stock markets and manage their own 401k and their investments. For others, they want to start a company. But I think that challenge, that need to do more and learn is there. And I think a lot of burnout is we stop feeding that. We stop that. And so I'm a big growth person. For me, I love building things. I'm one of those guys that I don't think I'll ever retire. What I'm into and what I'm doing will be different, but growing, building, and creating a company is one of the most exhilarating experiences you'll have, and the highs and lows are real. You know, as a CEO, capital allocation is my number one priority because any money I take in, I need to make sure I'm doing well with that and taking care of what my investors have trusted with me. So,
welcome to the Doctors Investor Club podcast, where physicians and dentists come together to elevate their mindset, build their assets, and create a lasting legacy. I'm your host, Dr. Kyle Stevenson. After years in the OR, I've realized wealth is not just about high income. It's about ownership, freedom, and using your money with purpose. Here at the Doctors Investor Club, we share the strategies the wealthy already know: owning a business, real estate investing, becoming your own banker, and intentional investing. Each week, we sit down with entrepreneurs, investors, and physicians who've stepped off the hamster wheel and are building wealth that outlives them. Because at the end of the day, it's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep and the impact you leave behind. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome back to the Doctors Investor Club podcast. This is your host, Kyle Stevenson. Today's guest is someone who has made the transition that many physicians talk about, but few actually execute. Dr. Conrad Ivie is an orthopedic surgeon, investor, and entrepreneur who has built a significant presence in real estate and alternative investments while still maintaining his identity in medicine. Dr. Ivie is the founder and CEO at Physicians Capital. They partner with doctors to co-develop and co-invest in healthcare real estate, medical office buildings, ASCs, and other specialized medical properties. As the only physician-owned and led firm, they help doctors reclaim ownership, earn passive income, and build lasting wealth. He's focused on helping physicians understand capital and how to break out of the traditional income for time model. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. No, we appreciate you coming on. First, just give us your background. Where are you from? Where are you practicing now? And what led you into that practice?
So I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee. I practice. I'm a total joint surgeon, so hip and knee replacement. I've been here for 10 years. Originally, I'm from Southeast Missouri. That was home. Ultimately ended up at University of Missouri in Central Missouri for undergrad. And then medical school was in Memphis. Residency was at Columbia, Missouri. Fellowship was in DC at Anderson Clinic.
Very good. And so you've been in your practice now for 10 years, you said?
I've been here for 10 years. And so it's been a great process. But along that way, I kind of grew into the business aspect of things and kind of that future growth development side of the company.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about it. I mean, in medicine, you're an orthopedic surgeon. You do mostly joints, it sounds like, hip and
Correct.
knee replacement. So you're busy doing that. You make good money doing that. And so, you know, what made you want to make that transition into a business owner?
As I got into medicine and even as a resident, I really realized that there were a lot of decisions that affected a surgeon or a physician's day-to-day that were made not by physicians and were made outside of an operating room, outside of a clinic. And so I've always had an interest in that. I think that goes back to residency. And then as I got into practice, one of the big things that we found here locally is so much of our physicians' time when you talk about meetings and those kind of things were spent operationally. And so I started a strategic planning committee for us, and it was focused on what the company looks like 5 and 10 years out, and that long-term growth model of the business and company. And that's really where we first started with really business development and things where I expanded my knowledge. And I took that. We ended up leading into a merger to where we're the largest orthopedic group in the state of Tennessee. Subsequently, our urgent care and quick care strategies came out of it for our local group. And then ultimately our surgery center and our development company, as well as my local real estate company for our group, all came out of that strategic planning committee.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, let's just talk about it. So, like, I look back to my residency, and everybody reads the White Coat Investor book, and I was reading Rich Dad Poor Dad and all the Robert Kiyosaki stuff along the way, and so I feel like that propelled me. But we get zero financial education in residency, medical school, basically all the way through. So, what did you start learning entrepreneurship and business when you were training, or did it really come along the way when you were in practice and doing all of these things that you're talking about?
I was very fortunate. We had training with the university, but also with a private practice group there in town. And so in Columbia, Missouri. So when I got to the private practice side, I realized there was this whole other level that I needed to learn about. And so I think my first book was my personal MBA, which is just a good overview of business in general. And then subsequently that led into about every other book that he referenced in that series, and then kind of growing from there. So yeah, going back to residency, I had an active interest in it, but you had to educate yourself, right? Like it was a
Absolutely.
lift.
Absolutely. Yep. And then early on in your practice, were you investing in real estate or any alternative investments, or were you just doing the stock market, 401k, like most doctors out there?
I was being like most doctors out there, right? My goal when I came in was to get busy and do good surgery and take care of patients, and that was really my focus. And then I got involved with growing our local group. Subsequent to that, I found myself in certain meetings and times where they started covering financials, and I didn't feel like I owned that part of that conversation. I felt like I was kind of following along, but not keeping up, and that was a gap. So I went back and got my MBA,
Hmm.
and that really helped with the financial knowledge. Of like the number one thing I got out of that is just being able to understand balance sheets, income statements, where the company's headed, to look at a financial statement and just really be able to give an opinion on it versus just taking what somebody's telling me about it, right? And so
Mhm.
that was a huge lift for me, and a real turning point too, as far as being able to look at other companies, as I am now like invested in multiple startup companies, and then I have my own company, being able to run those financials and understand where they're headed, and kind of stay out of bad situations is what you
Mhm.
really want to do.
Yeah, good for you. Yeah, my dad was an entrepreneur for 30 plus years, and I knew I was going to go into medicine. So when him and my older brothers were talking business, I kind of stayed on the other side of the table, like, I don't have to know anything about that. And he always said, if you understand an income statement and a balance sheet, you can run any business. And it wasn't until recently that I understood P&Ls and income statements and all that stuff. And you're exactly right, but it is so foreign to most physicians that it's striking. And to a degree, I think that we can get taken advantage of, and I think that we do because of that.
Oh, I agree 1,000%. And even if you look at our more innovative colleagues, so like I'm very good at business and development and those kind of things, but even if somebody innovates and starts a new product, how your product looks on a P&L statement directly affects whether or not a buyer can look at it and how they can value it. And those make big differences. And I know of multiple deals, even in the past year, that major companies have looked at that have not gone through because of what it looked like on the P&L statement. And I think it's very important. You actually make a quote from your dad a couple of times on some of the podcasts I've listened to, and it's, as an entrepreneur, your best day and your worst day can often be the same day,
Yeah.
and the highs and lows of it. And that is such a true statement.
Yeah. And that's why, a lot of docs are like, they're so secure in their job, and it's hard to take that leap of faith basically. And it's scary territory, right? When you can have the worst day and the best day in your life. Like, yeah, some patients don't do as great as you want and complications, whatever. But for the most part, you know what you're getting yourself into in being a physician. But being an entrepreneur is just different territory.
I agree 1,000%. And I find it very common as I talk to my colleagues and even my partners in the companies as physicians. We're great at making split second decisions in an operating room, right?
Yep.
Where we're not great is making split second business decisions. And so we end up over analyzing things and kind of really slowing down a process because we want all of the information when you really need to act much sooner on the information you have. So for me, it's about educating people enough to get them where they can make those decisions without needing all the information. That's very tough with physicians.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would imagine a lot of people come to you. Um, your accent helps a lot, right? Like
Yeah.
you're very trusting when I speak to you. So I would imagine a lot of people come to you for advice and consultation when it comes to a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, for every company that I may invest with, or every person that we kind of look at on these kind of things, I probably have said no to 10 or 15, or just given advice. Not everybody needs you to give them money. Sometimes they just need good advice about where they should go or where they should focus. And so, like, I don't really get involved with a company unless I'm super passionate about it and can benefit them, right? Like, because if I can point them to one of my colleagues that helps them more, I would prefer to do that. And then as far as like the day to day and my partners, yeah, I feel like I talk to my young guys coming in. I try to be as available as possible so that they can bounce things off of, or just general, practice management is a huge thing too. And not just for your whole group, but just your individual practice. What does that look like? How do you make decisions? Your timing, right? Like you and I both live in this world where we live in two worlds now, and we have to put time into both things. And if you don't put time into things, they don't grow.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. You don't want to be great at being a physician and you're still doing the side gig, which is real estate, and you're only putting part of your time in doing that. Well, you're going to fail at that because you're not putting all your eggs in that basket. If you're going to do something, you want to be really good at doing that. So,
agreed.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You can speak to that if you need to.
No, I think you said it very well.
Yeah. Explain Physicians Capital, what you guys do, when you started it. Just get into the background of it and where you saw the need to get that going.
So for me, Physicians Capital started after I got into real estate for us locally. So my group locally never had owned any real estate. We leased everything. And we were operating at 3 different surgery centers, and we needed to change that. And through that, I led our properties company in development of our surgery center. It's a 10 OR facility here in Knoxville. And that really kind of got me moving towards real estate. But even before that, as I was just in the process, even before we broke ground, I'd gone back and gotten my MBA. And what is Physicians Capital now started with my business plan when I was getting my MBA. And that was my business plan I built out there. And from that, it grew. It takes time, but I've been working on it, not full time, but a lot more of my time dedicated to it over the past 2 years to get it up, going, get the right people, because that's essential, and then make our first acquisitions and kind of grow and develop from there.
I love it. That's really cool to see it, to create that business plan, but then actually execute it. And, a lot of people that read social or look at social media think that, things happen overnight, which it obviously doesn't. It takes a lot of time and sleepless nights to get to where you are, right?
It takes a ton of time. And, to your previous question, what is Physicians Capital, right? Physicians Capital is a physician-led, physician-focused investment platform. So we really want to become not just investment, but we want to become a platform for physicians to reclaim ownership. And we focus around real estate because it's a very scalable, tangible, stable asset that doctors can understand and grow. And we look to expand into other healthcare asset classes as we grow, but our focus is medical real estate.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, I mean, the overall picture of medicine right now is, are you guys still private? You guys still
Yes.
Private group? Okay. Which is great. And I know in a lot of different states, in Indiana, a lot of groups are getting bought out by private equity who knows nothing about healthcare. They come in, buy them up, and basically change the whole structure of it all. And then doctors are unhappy. Or big hospital systems come in, or the doctors are just employed. I think 75% of docs now are employed either by private equity or hospital. And so that mindset just seems too many docs are coming out and they're just like, okay, I'm going to be employed and I'm not going to understand the business. Well, then they get burnout. And I think burnout, and you can speak to this too, burnout is not being aligned with your practice or not being aligned with, who you're working for, maybe feeling like you're in that rat race or hamster wheel. And so, more docs need what you're doing because they need to regain that ownership.
Oh, I agree. I think alignment is key to prevent that burnout. Believe that more value than what we even realize is based off of the systems that we control and have built, and it's kind of off the back of physicians, right? And when I say physicians, I mean physicians, healthcare providers in general, like nurses. Those groups are where healthcare occurs, and then everything else is built on top of it, right? And so ownership is essential. If you go back just over time, everybody has seen healthcare as an asset class, and that's continued to grow, except the doctors. We've continued to shrink our ownership of that asset class. I do believe that it leads to burnout. I also believe a lot of burnout is because we do all this work to get there. It takes such a long process. And then you enter into a career where it becomes very single lane as far as what you're doing. There's not a lot of growth. You're doing this one thing, seeing patients in clinic, doing these surgeries, and it becomes very like, hey, I need a challenge. And we're naturally students. We naturally want to grow and expand, and we always have. And so I think real estate, investment platforms, uh, whatever your other thing that you want to be into is, I think it's essential for doctors to have a challenge outside of just their day-to-day practice. That's something that they're interested in. For some people, that's they want to do the stock markets and manage their own 401k and their investments. For others, they want to start a company. But I think that challenge, that need to do more and learn, is there. And I think a lot of burnout is we stop feeding that. We stop
Mm-hmm.
that. And so I'm a big growth person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You're exactly right. That growth mindset, that's like Tony Robbins, right? It's like
Yeah.
you're either growing or you're dying. And that's essentially what's going on. Um, and I talk to young physicians and residents all the time about that stuff. And, you're like, okay, what do you want to do in 10 years? What do you want to do in 20 years? We're like, well, I'm going to be an orthopedic surgeon. So I'm going to be good, for the next 30 years. And that's kind of what I feel like White Coat Investor talks to or talks about is just, you'll be rich. Just, focus on your career for 30 years and then put your money in the stock market and you'll be good. But he doesn't talk, they don't think about the growth mindset and the challenges that you need. And you can't just be in a hamster wheel for 30 years and then just be rich. Like that's not a life well lived. So that growth mindset is so important. And I talk to these guys about optionality. You never know what's going to happen in your first practice, second practice. And to have options is ideal. So if you're smart about your finances, start to understand financial IQ, you give yourself options. You don't feel like you're stuck in that one lane forever.
Oh, I agree completely. And think that more doctors are going to come out looking for those things. That's why I think owning your real estate, owning your management companies, all those things are going to become a larger and larger asset base for physicians as we continue to see more people want that optionality. Also, you have to look is like for our practice, if you do the same number of surgeries next year as you do this year, you're gonna make less money.
Yeah.
And so this mentality of I'm just going to operate and invest. Well, every year with inflation being, 2%, 3%, you've got to do like 4% more surgeries just to make up for that, right? And then if you look at healthcare cuts around physician reimbursement, et cetera, you have to always be doing more versus let's stop chasing the amount of surgeries or the amount of patients you see in clinic, which I think to your point earlier leads to a lot of the burnout. But
Mm-hmm.
subsequently, let's focus on some other things that we can invest in that we already understand, that we already know, and can grow together, and let that be the guide for some more of our income or just investment strategy long term. I mean, how great would healthcare be if every doctor is there just seeing patients, taking care of things, not having to worry about the financials of it because they've got these alternative avenues that also are helping take care of them as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Spot on. Yeah. And honestly, right now, I just feel like too many doctors are complaining about what's going on because so many things are out of their control. And that's unfortunate. They're like, well, now administration is doing this, or now, this is going on. And so it just feels like, yeah, they don't have control. They're the breadwinners of the hospital, but somebody else is making all those decisions. So, yeah, something that you guys are doing is definitely very valuable for a lot of physicians. So let's just go back to Physicians Capital. And how does that work? Are you basically helping groups if they want to get into real estate, say they lease their building, they're like, okay, we need you guys to come in and help be a consultant on this? Or are doctors coming to you and say, hey, I want to invest in what you guys are doing? You guys have a fund that people can invest in? How's that working?
So for Physicians Capital, the philosophy is basically three main lanes that we live in is like straight acquisitions of real estate. And then subsequent to that is working with doctors and the buildings or assets they currently own to help them grow that or repurpose it or help with strategies around ownership and exit points. And then the third one is development, which is honestly my favorite of the three, developing things from ground up. We are in the middle of an announced public reverse merger into the public space. And so we're always growing and we're always developing more things. And so for anybody that has more interest, I'm happy to answer those questions and things. But when you look at it, reach out and we're happy to talk about optionality of what we can do together. Because again, my goal is to just help physicians in this environment.
If you don't mind me asking, how are you guys raising money?
I raised money initially through friends and family that we know, not really friends, all friends and family, but my investment network of my physicians that I know. This was while it was still on the private side. And we have, about 40 doctors that are investors with us. And that's where we really started our investment or built our initial investment for the company.
That's great. Yeah. And it's funny too, like, I talk to a lot of investors about real estate investing, and, it's a good way to get out of the stock market, and there's tax benefits and there's appreciation and depreciation and all these things that you don't get with the stock market. But I feel like it's a ton of educating for physicians. What has that been like for you?
It's definitely a process. And I'll speak both from my local company and then my national company. Doctors, typically every group has one or two doctors that really understands it at a higher level, especially when you get into 30 and 40 guys in a group. You have one or two guys that really have been doing their real estate and they have a better understanding, and then everybody else you have to educate. So much of our time with a physician group when we're talking to them is about education. But like one of our first things that we want to talk about with doctors is like, what's your goal with your real estate? Where are you going with this? What are our real long-term goals with your real estate? And then we have to have a conversation about what's realistic, what's not, but then setting how is real estate really as an asset class used, because it's different than your house. And so many of us want to think about our surgery center we own or a building we own the same way as you do your house. And real estate's really powered by taking one deal, leveraging it, getting another deal done, and another deal after that, and kind of compounding through multiple buildings, compounding through growth. Yes, buildings will go up in value over time. For sure, that's going to happen. But at the same time, you can deploy that capital if you use it strategically to gain more real estate, to have more buildings and have a larger return, even though you may own a smaller piece over time. If everything's creating a larger and larger return, you're ultimately doing far better.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, I mean, you definitely belong in the family office club, setting. Just thinking more like the wealthy, and that's what this podcast is trying to do: get doctors thinking differently about money, because that's how the wealthy think, right? That velocity of money, being able to use your dollar multiple times, being able to use leverage, whether it's from real estate or whatever else, but use that leverage to go bigger in a strategic and smart way is huge. So you're probably getting a lot of docs who are just like mind blown when you tell them these things.
It does take a while, and that's why I think education is so key. and kind of showing it over time. The longer people have been in real estate, and especially groups that have had it a little longer or have seen the benefits of it, the easier those discussions are. But that's where you just have to meet each doctor and each group where they are
Mhm.
in their real estate journey,
Yep.
because we're all different. And I've talked to people that have brought me their property and it was funded up. They're in construction. They're doing all these things. They don't need capital right now. They're just wanting to get involved and work with us, right? And I'll look at them and say, "Hey, look, you should just go where you are, get this to the finish line, get your lease agreements done, and all those things, and then we can talk, right? You're gonna have more value then than you are today." And so, just helping them look at that, and then we've helped groups out where they had an option to buy a building and we did a full analysis for them and went back and said, "Hey guys, this your option and the value and the lifetime of this building, you're not going to get your money here. And so we don't think that this is the best move for you financially because ultimately you're going to have to put a lot of money in this building and you'd be better off either renegotiating or doing something different." So just meeting doctors where they are and educating. And that's a lot of times what we do. And so we look at plenty of deals and talk to plenty of companies and physicians that ultimately we don't transact with, but it's more about relationships,
Mhm.
and building that out. And my goal is to always do right by my doctors and my investors. Like those two things I want to always take care of.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, to your point, you're more relational and less transactional. You build that relationship with them, and so it's not just a, oh yeah, you're bringing money to the table, perfect. You get the relationships, which mean a lot more than the transactions.
Agreed. I think often get the question of like what makes a good investment, right? Or what makes a great investment. And healthcare real estate at baseline is a good investment. It's stable. It was COVID proof. It was 0708 proof. It didn't even see a big recession in the dot coms, right? Because doctors pay their bills and people still need healthcare, right? So
Hmm.
as long as you value these assets well and underwrite well and make good decisions, it's a great area for capital to come into because it's a stable asset that you don't have to really worry about during these times. But really, for me, what takes a good asset to a great asset is the people inside the building. It's the people I'm working with, the people I'm partnering with, who's occupying that space, making sure that we're well aligned long term, and that we're going to have great partners. Because I look at anybody that works with us, whether it's on a property we're going to come in and just acquire, or whether we're doing something together, or if they're looking at physicians capital as something that they are interested in general, I look at them as partners, not necessarily just shareholders, but
Hmm.
partners, because that's what the way we want to build this long term.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. And so I'm just curious on a more personal level. I work for a hospital here in town, Indianapolis, and I noticed that on your website, you guys have one of the ER urgent cares. And so, how does something like that work? Because that's a hospital that you've partnered with.
Yeah, that was an acquisition. So that acquisition was just something that we knew from one of the brokers that came back on the market for different reasons, and we'd already previously evaluated that real estate and looked at it. I focus in the ambulatory space, so freestanding ER urgent cares. I love ASCs, MOBs, and then ambulatory medical real estate. So we're not buying hospitals,
Hmm.
but that asset has a great, triple net lease with a phenomenal tenant. And so when we underwrote it and looked at everything, it was a phenomenal investment. So that's ultimately how we ended up with that property.
Yeah, I love that because I mean, if you think like medical spas, right? Like those could be in and out. Somebody may be a tenant for a year or two, but they're going to be in and out, more more transitory. But hospitals or big groups in town, like they're going to be around for a long time. That's a tenant that's going to be permanent.
Oh, agreed. And your building and how you value it, your lease comes in so heavy on what that can be valued at as far as acquisitions. So we do look at a lot of deals where they're an owner, sell lease back. structure long-term leases. You're pretty much looking at 10 years plus on most of the leases, and focus also on like triple net and absolute triple net leases, which allows us to partner with really stable tenants.
Yeah, that's great. Now let's just go like more philosophical. Where do you see healthcare going? I mean, you guys are still a private group. Like I said, here in Indiana, a lot of groups are getting bought out by somebody, whether it's private equity, a big hospital, whatever. Where do you see healthcare going? Do you see that pendulum swinging back to where more doctors want to be in private practice? I know that there's some concierge medicine that's coming to the forefront. More docs getting that cash pay, trying to do away with insurance companies. Do you see that changing much, or where do you see the landscape in the future?
I see it swinging. I agree with you. I think everything's on a pendulum. As I've looked in healthcare, I think we're going to see a swing. I'm not anti-private equity, but I'm very pro-physician equity.
Yeah.
And I think that where we are is we've swung one way very far. And I think we're going to start swinging back. And that's why I developed a physician-friendly, physician-focused ownership platform so that we can have access and the ability to kind of start reclaiming that physician equity over time. And I think you'll see more and more of us owning our assets, keeping things long term. I think there'll be a lot of physicians with some mobility around things as we grow in the future, that maybe they've gotten into something that they want to get out of an employment model, because that I have no data on it. I can't tell you for sure, but
Yeah.
I would wager that burnout is higher in an employed model than it is when you feel like you own the practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you'll see a swing back to it. Will it be 100%? No. Some doctors do just want to come out and have that stable income, and that's great. I have no issue with that. But I think for the entrepreneurial, for the guys that want to grow more or have more freedom of some decisions in what they do in practice, I think you'll see that swing back. And then I Look, I think there'll be a lot of things in the longevity space, and true, like well care versus healthcare. Like what we call healthcare is really
Sick
more
care.
of sick care. And so I think the wellness space is, and I know a lot of what you're working on, we've talked about,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the wellness space is going to be one of those huge growth industries over the next 5 and 10 years. Just like hospitals have been important over a long period of time, and now outpatient, ASC, and all that growth space in surgery has become the predominant area of growth, is that outpatient shift of surgeries that were traditionally only thought to be done in the hospital.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just spoke the other day to he's an anesthesiologist, but he started up an ASC in this area, and they are transparent with their pricing. They're basically cash only, and so docs go there. They take some of their patients, and they'll go to that surgery center. Or working with employers, that's another big one. A lot of these big employers are self-insured, so they want to save money on that stuff. And so, yeah, the hospital model may not be the future. It's probably not anyway, because to your point, it is sick care. And, for me, going to the hospital, I hate in between cases. I'm sitting there with, candy on one side, donuts on the other, crappy food. And that's what the patients are eating. And that's what the cafeteria has. It's just like very processed stuff. And so we're basically, those hospitals are fueling that sick care. And I think it's a recurring patient, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I think hospitals will always be necessary.
Sure.
I definitely have patients. I operated at my hospital yesterday, and two larger revision cases, and then some patients that needed to be able to be watched a little bit more. Even several of them went home, but still, I had patients that I prefer to be in that hospital setting, just to have the extra support and services. And so I think they'll always be necessary, but hospitals are seeing and feeling the shift of that outpatient care. And the good thing about it is that's helping patients, it's helping pricing, it's decreasing the cost to the whole healthcare economy of just where the spend comes from. And the great thing is like with the longevity stuff, I think it'll help decrease that in the future, but we
Mhm.
won't feel that for 15, 20 years, because it'll take a while to kind of get that new group through where you have some more of your time focusing on that well care versus the traditional system.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. So, I have some buddies that are in the real estate space that are full-time physicians. I'm the same. And I have a couple buddies who, I've realized almost got a little burnout, just spreading themselves too thin. And so, and my wife and I, every month, definitely every quarter, but probably every month, we have to audit our time and realize like, all right, am I doing too much, or am I, doing what I need to do to ultimately spend more time with the family, which is the ultimate goal, right? So for you, how do you divide your time between orthopedics, physicians capital, and everything else you're doing? I'm assuming you have a family. So how do you divide that time?
Yeah, so I have a wife, 3 daughters, and so 15, 13, and 6, so we are very active. I try to be at everything I can. I'm not gonna make everything. I think one shift that's been difficult, and we're working through it, is, when you start a company, when you're a founder and a CEO and an entrepreneur, like, that is a different level. It's not as easy to turn off and on as even the practice was, right? And so for me, I scaled back my time at the practice so that I spend time during the day focused on the business, the companies, the things that I'm working on outside of it. But it's still, there are times where I need to be working on it at night, or an investor with me calls, and I'm not going to not take their call if there's
Mm-hmm.
something that they're needing to reach me on. So there's some sacrifice there. I make up for it by going on a lot of vacations. And so getting away and having that time where they're not at school, I'm not at work, and we have a vacation where it's all of us. And even if that's just a weekend trip, just it's all of us focused on each other. We're not focused on all the other things that are going on. I think
Yep.
it's important.
Yeah, good for you. Yep. I mean, we talk about it all the time. It's like try to keep the cell phones away when we can, because as a doctor and in real estate, both, I mean, you literally could be answering a message all the time, email or text or about a patient or whatever. And so it's truly being intentional with that time with your kids and family.
Yeah, I like your idea of a time audit. I'm probably gonna figure out how to do that myself,
Hmm. Yeah.
truthfully. But yeah, I'm probably guilty of keeping my phone on me too much. We do try to put it up at times, and I definitely try when everybody's home and kind of getting in from the day to put it all up and kind of get all of that done together. And that time of like just hearing about what's going on, uh, no cell phones at like the dinner table and those kind of things. But definitely probably could do a better job.
So, two more questions, and then we'll get into like our little quick round of final four. But first one is, for all these like young physicians that look at, the life of a real estate investor, or you running your own business, what are the joys in that you've seen outside of your practice that you see maybe with Physicians Capital? Yeah, what are the highlights?
For me, I love building things. I'm one of those guys that I don't think I'll ever retire. What I'm into and what I'm doing will be different, but growing, building, and creating a company is one of the most exhilarating experiences you'll have, and the highs and lows are real. Um, it's the challenge and learning something and getting into areas that you know, you're uncomfortable, right? You're uncomfortable in these areas that you have to enter into that you've never done before, like talking to people about investing with you, being
Hmm.
trusted with other people's capital and being a steward of that, right? And as a CEO, capital allocation is my number one priority because any money I take in, I need to make sure I'm doing well with that and taking care of what my investors have trusted with me. So when you look at it, the thrills are high, the learning is great, and I think that's the best part about it is that you're challenged beyond what you're doing on a day-to-day basis because, at times it feels repetitive in your practice, and when you're feeling that, having things that challenge you outside of that really keeps you stimulated and involved in ways that if you just continue to do the same thing doesn't quite give me that same
Hmm.
feeling.
Yeah, I love that. And I would argue you're a better physician because of it, right?
Oh,
Because yeah, go ahead.
absolutely. I think time helps too. I mean, I look at things now that 10 years ago would have bothered me or I'd have been upset about that nowadays just doesn't seem to bother me as much.
Hmm.
Or doesn't even hit your radar of something to be upset about. And so I think growth and time, but that for those young physicians out there, the early part of your career where you're trying to grow, it's stressful because that's what you're trying to do. And those cash flows and what you're developing at that time, they have impact and they give you the ability to do these other things, but creating alternative revenue, alternative ways to stimulate yourself at that same time is very beneficial. And I mean, I was somebody I probably put my head down too long on just trying to grow the clinical practice, and I'm grateful for it for what I have and the practice I have and my partners. But also building yourself outside of it, and then investing in yourself, like going back and getting an
Hmm.
MBA or um, health and wellness. Like to your point of earlier, taking care of yourself. It's like I haven't always done the best of that, and there have been times where I've been not as healthy. And then there are times where I'm, doing really well in that. And so know when to offload things too. If you have trouble doing it on your own, hire a trainer.
Yep, exactly. I mean, that's what I tell my wife. I'm like, we make money for convenience. There, if you don't want to clean the house, then that's why I work so hard to make sure that we can offload that stuff.
Yeah.
That's part of it. But yep, I love that. And you mentioned time along with the growth mindset. I would say that you could even say is wisdom, right? Like with experience, with time, with all the challenges you've gone through and everything you faced, you are now wise, much wiser than you were 10 years ago. And so you can give advice to people much younger to say, hey, this is what I've gone through. This is what I've learned. This is what you can take from it.
Yeah. I think it's key to kind of try to pass it on. And especially when I go out and teach at courses and things, a lot of what we spend time talking about isn't even, they're there to learn surgical technique or how to use a robot, but oftentimes it's all the other intangibles that we end up talking and spending a lot
Mhm.
of time talking, discussing with the attendees. And even with the other people teaching, it's like you spend a lot of time discussing all of that, not just the surgical technique you're there
Yep.
to teach that day.
Yep. Yeah. So on that note, last question I'll say is, what advice do you have for, it could be medical students, residents, young physicians who are listening to this and thinking, man, that's complex. I'm not even close to that. What advice do you have for them to say, just in general?
I would say first find a mentor, and now we're accessible at a larger scale than what we ever have. You can connect with people anywhere in the world, and so even if it isn't, you should have somebody in your practice that's helping you that you can kind of bounce things off of. But you can have access to anybody in the U.S. So, like, find somebody that you have like-minded thoughts and ideas with, and that you can feel like you can learn and grow from, and just go learn from them, talk to them, right? Um, the other thing is just be be very protective of your time and your family, and realize that as a physician, we are unlikely to make every sporting event, every dance competition, and those things, but know the important ones and make sure you're there for those. And then just be curious and learn, and never hesitate to invest in yourself. I think it's your first investment should be in yourself, and that's time. That's, your asset, going back and learning something you don't feel like you're knowing, and then investing in your family and making sure they're taken care of.
Yeah, I love that. Great way to end it. Um, let's finish with four quick questions.
Okay.
But I love that final answer to that question. That's going to be very invaluable for a lot of people. So these last four questions are quick. What book are you reading right now?
Currently, I'm reading The Outsiders by Thorndike, which is about investors and CEOs that have led large companies. And it's a lot about capital allocation and decisions that are required by a CEO uh, to take care of the company and the investors.
Fantastic. What advice would you give to your 25-year-old self?
For my 25-year-old self, I would tell them to learn about business way sooner, and take risk way sooner. You kind of feel like you always have to get the next thing in line before you do or reach out or venture out. And then I would say to speak up for yourself. Like, nobody is just going to give anybody anything. And I think we're all really good about speaking up for ourselves. But in the business world and in that aspect, like, if you want to be involved with something, just call people, talk to them, like, don't hesitate. And so I think keeping that in mind is essential. Is like, hey, if you want to be involved in something, you've got to put yourself out there.
What's your personal definition of wealth?
My personal definition of wealth is about time. And that's the number one thing that I talk to my kids about. And so I often tell them, one is that you got to protect your time because it's your most valuable asset. And I want to spend it with them. I mean, I love, my wife and my kids, and that's where I want to spend a lot of my time, but I also love working. And like I said earlier, it's like, I always like working. And so, growing things, that to me is exhilarating. And that's part of my definition of wealth, is like that challenge and that growing things and building stuff and working towards something that outlasts me. I think is really part of what I consider, not just financial wealth, but like life wealth of, hey, I'm growing something more. And then that would be my big focus. And then the other thing on that is, like, I tell my daughters, if you're ever doing something for one reason, it's probably the wrong reason. You should be doing everything you're doing you should have multiple reasons why you're doing something.
Very good. Proverbs 11:25 states, "A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed." If you could make one lasting impact by giving back, what would that be?
Mine really would be around physician ownership and kind of creating an environment of physician platforms that allow doctors and healthcare providers to do the true healthcare, taking care of patients, with having this other asset class, these other things that they feel like they're taken care of, and they have some more ownership. I think that'll decrease burnout. And really, for me, it's building something that's lasting and will kind of go that longer distance. And that's really what I believe it'll be.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, basically what you're saying is you're living your purpose, right? Which is awesome.
I love every day. There's stress. There's times that you're like, why? But then, you turn around and talk to the next person, you do the next thing, you meet people like yourself and other like-minded individuals, and you're just energized by them. And so I love, every aspect of my life.
That's fantastic. I love that. This is a great episode. Conrad, you are phenomenal, very impressive guy. And you brought a ton of value to this episode. So we appreciate that. Where can people find you and reach out?
So they can reach out. Our website is physicianscapital.com. And then my email is conrad@physicianscapital.com. So anybody that, has questions or would like to discuss anything more, reach out in those aspects. Kyle, it's I also want to say I love what you're doing. I'm super excited about this next venture as you kind of get into that, and I want to hear more about that in the future too.
Yes, absolutely. We appreciate you, sir. We'll get this out here soon.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, sir.
This is my time. I'm on the rise. Can't hold me down. I'm too fly. This is my time.
Thanks for listening to the Doctors Investor Club podcast. I hope today's conversation inspired you to think bigger, dream bolder, and take the next step toward financial freedom. If you're a doctor or dentist and you're ready to join our community, head over to doctorsinvestorclub.com. There you'll find our free mobile app and private forum, built exclusively for physicians and dentists, featuring AI tools, curated investor resources, and live event access. And if you're at the stage where you want to see real estate opportunities we personally invest in, you can visit investwithdrkyle.com. There's no pressure, just transparency, education, and access when you're ready. Subscribe to the show, share it with a colleague, and remember, you're not just building wealth, you're building a legacy.
This is my time.